The billionaire pointed at him and laughed. "You, a washed-up single dad, trying to talk to my son." Her friends joined in, mocking, but when the black single father finally spoke up, the entire restaurant went silent. What happened next didn't just humiliate her, it destroyed her reputation forever. Would you stay silent if speaking up could cost your job but restore someone's dignity? That night at the Golden Palm, Marcus had to choose, and his choice changed everything. Marcus Jackson's shoulders carried more than just the weight of the Golden Palm's dinner service. They carried the weight of Emma's pharmacy bills, the weight of a notice taped to his apartment door in red ink, the weight of 47 days left before everything ended. He was 34 years old and running out of time. The restaurant smelled like money, that particular bouquet of leather, expensive wine, and the kind of perfume that cost more than Marcus made in a week. He moved through it like a phantom, tray balanced on one hand, the other kept low at his side. Invisible. That was the goal. Invisible men didn't get noticed. Invisible men didn't lose their jobs. Invisible men could stay long enough to pay for their daughter's heart surgery. It was 6:47 p.m. Emma's evening medication was due at 8. Mrs. Chen from downstairs had it, but Marcus had called twice to remind her. His daughter was 7 years old, small-boned, bright-eyed, with a congenital heart defect that had aged him 10 years in as many months. The doctors used words like surgical intervention and valve repair, but what Marcus heard was expensive. What he calculated was impossible. The eviction notice was still in his locker. Found it that morning, taped to his apartment door with the kind of finality that didn't allow for negotiation. 60 days. He was already 2 months behind. Every shift he worked now bought him another day, another hour, another breath with his daughter. "Marcus." He turned. It was Deshawn, the floor manager, standing by the host stand with his arms folded like a man about to deliver bad news dressed up as opportunity. "Table 12 tonight," Deshawn said, not meeting his eyes. "VIP." Marcus glanced toward the corner booth, the one they saved for people who could destroy you with a phone call and never think about it again. His stomach tightened. "Who?" he asked, though he already knew the answer would hurt. Deshawn leaned in. "Victoria Hartwell. She requested you specifically. Said she wanted the best service we had." He paused. "Don't fuck this up." The name landed like a stone in cold water. Victoria Hartwell. Real estate empire, charity galas, magazine covers that made her look like she actually cared about people. She was the kind of woman who could ruin someone, and the worst part was she'd never remember doing it. Marcus nodded. He didn't trust his voice. He thought about the eviction notice, about Emma's prescription refill due next week, about the $19.43 in his checking account. He couldn't afford to fuck this up. At 7:15, the doors opened and Victoria Hartwell walked in like she'd designed the building herself. Maybe she had. She wore a black dress that probably cost more than Marcus's rent, heels that clicked against marble with the kind of confidence that came from never being told no. 3 women followed in her wake, all dressed in identical shades of wealth and indifference. Marcus straightened his apron and approached. He kept his face neutral, the face of a man who knew his place and had made peace with it. "Good evening," he said. "Welcome to the Golden Palm." Victoria didn't look at him. She was already scanning the wine list, one manicured finger tracing down the page, like she was reading a ransom note. "We'll start with the Chateau Margaux 2003, she said, still not looking up. Marcus wrote it down. $850. He'd looked up the price once and regretted it. "Of course," he said. "I'll have that right out." He turned to leave, but the door opened again. A young man stepped inside, 19, maybe 20, wearing a jacket that didn't quite fit, moving like he wasn't sure he had the right to occupy space. His eyes stayed on the floor. His hands moved in small, restless gestures. Victoria glanced up, and something cold moved behind her eyes. "Ethan," she called out, "sit down." The young man walked to the table and slid into the far seat, as far from his mother as the booth would allow. Marcus noticed the way his fingers tapped against his leg, the way his eyes tracked the movement of people's lips, the way he tried to disappear into himself. Marcus had seen this before. His younger brother was the same way. He brought the wine, poured it carefully, and stepped closer to Ethan's side of the table. He moved slowly, deliberately, the way you approach something that's been hurt. When Ethan looked up, Marcus met his eyes and spoke clearly, enunciating each word. "What would you like to order?" Ethan's face shifted. Relief, maybe surprise. His hands lifted, fingers beginning to form shapes in the air. Then he stopped. His fingers curled into fists. He pointed at the menu instead. "The salmon," Marcus said. "Good choice." Ethan's shoulders relaxed, just barely, just enough. But Victoria's voice cut through the moment like a blade. "What are you doing?" Marcus looked up. Victoria was staring at him with an expression caught between disbelief and disgust. The whole table had gone silent. "Taking his order," Marcus said carefully. Victoria laughed, sharp, performative, designed to be heard. Her friends joined in, a chorus of mockery that spread across the table like spilled wine. "A waiter thinks he can talk to my son," Victoria said loud enough for nearby tables to hear. "Can you believe this?" Marcus's jaw tightened. Heat crawled up his neck. He wanted to tell her that her son deserved to be spoken to like a human being. That treating him like he was invisible was worse than any disability. That shame doesn't cure deafness. It only teaches silence. But he didn't. He couldn't. He thought about Emma, the eviction notice, the $19 in his account. "My apologies," he said quietly. "I'll bring your meals out shortly." He turned and walked toward the kitchen, each step heavier than the last. Behind him, the laughter continued. But as he pushed through the kitchen doors, he caught one last glimpse of Ethan. The young man was staring down at the table, his face red, his hands clenched so tightly his knuckles had gone white. Marcus knew that look. He'd seen it in the mirror every morning for the past 3 years. Marcus stood in the kitchen with his back against the cold steel counter, breathing through his nose. His hands were shaking. He pressed them flat against his apron and counted. The cook, a broad-shouldered man named Ty, glanced over from the grill. "You good?" Ty asked. Marcus didn't answer. He wasn't good, but he couldn't afford not to be. He loaded the tray. Salmon for Ethan, filet mignon for Victoria, sea bass, lamb chops for the others. $60 plates arranged with surgical precision. He pushed back through the doors. The dining room felt heavier now, like everyone was watching, waiting. He set the plates down one by one. Victoria didn't acknowledge him. She was too busy talking about a property acquisition in the Marina district, her voice loud and confident. Her friends nodded along, sipping wine that cost more than Marcus's car payment. He placed the salmon in front of Ethan. The young man looked up briefly, and Marcus saw something flicker in his eyes. Gratitude, sadness, something in between. "Is there anything else?" Marcus asked. Victoria waved him off. "We're fine." He turned to leave, but then he saw it. Ethan's lips moving, forming words that didn't quite make it into the air. The young man was gripping the edge of the table like it was the only thing keeping him tethered to earth. Victoria noticed too. Her expression darkened. "Ethan," she said sharply, "sit up straight." Ethan didn't move. He looked like he wanted to fold into himself and disappear completely. One of Victoria's friends leaned in with that saccharine smile that rich people used when they wanted to seem kind. "Is he okay?" Victoria laughed again, but it was different this time. Bitter, tired, cruel. "He's fine," she said. "He just doesn't know how to behave in public." Something twisted in Marcus's chest. A knot that had been tightening for years suddenly pulled tight. He thought about Emma, the way she looked at him when she was in pain and trying to hide it, the way she smiled even when doctors said things that made Marcus want to scream, the way she'd asked him last week, "Daddy, am I broken?" And he thought about this boy, Ethan, who'd been made to feel broken by the very person who was supposed to love him unconditionally. The choice crystallized then, clear, sharp, impossible. Marcus stepped forward. His voice came out steady, calm, clear. "Excuse me." Victoria looked up, irritation flashing across her face. "What now?" Marcus met her gaze. He didn't flinch. "Your son tried to tell you something," Marcus said. "Maybe you should listen." The table went silent. One of Victoria's friends gasped. Another reached for her phone, screen glowing. Victoria's expression shifted from irritation to disbelief, to something colder, sharper. "I'm sorry," she said slowly, voice dripping with condescension. "Did you just tell me how to speak to my son?" Marcus's heart was pounding, but he kept his voice even. "I'm saying maybe he deserves to be heard." Victoria stood up. Her chair scraped against the floor, loud in the sudden quiet. She was taller than Marcus had expected. She looked down at him like he was something she'd scraped off her shoe. "You have no idea who you're talking to," she said. "I know exactly who I'm talking to," Marcus said. The words hung between them, sharp, dangerous. Victoria's laugh was cold. She turned to her friends, gesturing at Marcus like he was a joke. "A black waiter in this city thinks he can lecture me about my son," she said. Then, lower, "You know how many restaurants I own, how many lives I control." She stepped closer. "I know all about you, Marcus Jackson. Single father, struggling, 2 months behind on rent, hospital bills that never end. Mrs. Chen telling everyone in your building how hard you're working just to survive." The words hit like a physical blow. She knew. Somehow she knew everything. Marcus felt his hands clench. "You don't get to humiliate your own son just because you can. You don't get to do that." Victoria stepped even closer, her eyes blazing with rage and something else. Fear, maybe. The fear of someone whose power had just been questioned. "You're fired," she said. The ground shifted beneath Marcus. The room tilted. He thought about Emma, the hospital bills, the eviction notice. He thought about how he was going to tell his daughter that her father had just lost his job. But then he looked at Ethan, and the young man was staring at him with wide eyes, his mouth slightly open, shocked, hopeful. And Marcus realized something. If he walked away now, he'd be teaching both their children the same lesson Victoria had been teaching Ethan, that your voice doesn't matter, that survival is more important than dignity, that silence is the price of safety. He turned back to Victoria. "Then I'm fired," he said. The silence that followed was suffocating. Victoria's smile was cruel. "You'll never work in this city again. I'll make sure of it." But then something shifted in the room. Ethan stood up. The movement was sudden, jerky, like he'd been holding himself down for years and finally let go. He looked at his mother, and for the first time that night, his face wasn't filled with shame. It was filled with anger. "Stop," he said. His voice was rough, uneven, the voice of someone not used to using it, but it was loud, clear. Victoria turned to him, stunned. "Ethan, sit down." Ethan shook his head. His hands were trembling, but he didn't sit. He looked at Marcus, then back at his mother. "I'm deaf, Mom," he said slowly, deliberately. "Not broken." The restaurant erupted, not in laughter this time, but in something else. A murmur that spread like wildfire, gasps, whispers. Victoria's face went pale, her mouth opened, but no words came out. Ethan turned toward Marcus. His eyes were wet, but he was smiling, a small, fragile, powerful smile. Then he walked past his mother, past the table, and headed for the door. Victoria grabbed her purse, her movements sharp and frantic. She looked at Marcus, her expression twisted with rage. "You're done," she spat. "You hear me? Done." She stormed out, her friend scrambling to follow. The door slammed behind them, and the restaurant stayed silent for one long moment. Then someone started clapping. It was soft at first, hesitant, but then another person joined in, and another. Within seconds, the entire restaurant was applauding, the sound filling the space like a wave. Marcus stood frozen, the tray still in his hands. He didn't feel victorious. He felt numb, terrified. Deshawn appeared at his side, his face grim. "My office," Deshawn said. "Now." Marcus's locker clicked shut. He grabbed his jacket and pushed through the back exit into the cold night air. He stood there for a moment, staring up at the sky, trying to figure out how everything had fallen apart so fast. His phone buzzed. A text from Mrs. Chen. "Emma's asking for you. She's okay. Just missing her dad." Marcus closed his eyes. He felt the weight of everything pressing down on him. The job, the rent, the bills, the future that had just collapsed. But when he thought about Ethan's face, the way the young man had finally used his voice, Marcus felt something else too. He felt like maybe, just maybe, he'd done the right thing, even if it cost him everything. Marcus didn't sleep that night. He sat on the edge of his bed in the dark, staring at the eviction notice on the dresser. Emma was asleep in the next room, her breathing soft and steady through the thin wall. He checked on her 3 times, standing in her doorway, watching her chest rise and fall, reassuring himself that she was still okay, still here. By morning, his phone had 23 missed calls, unknown numbers. He ignored them all. He made Emma breakfast, cereal with the last of the milk. She ate slowly, her small hands wrapped around the spoon. "You're home early?" she asked. Marcus forced a smile. "Got the morning off." "Are you sad?" Emma asked, tilting her head. Marcus's throat tightened. "No, sweetheart, I'm okay." But he wasn't okay, and he was about to get much worse before anything got better. Emma turned on the television. That's when Marcus heard it, a voice from the TV, familiar, sharp. He turned and saw the screen filled with an image of the golden palm, then a shaky video filmed on a phone. It was him. Marcus stood frozen, soap dripping from his hands as he watched himself on the screen. The video showed everything, the confrontation, the silence, Ethan standing up, the applause. The video, posted late last night, has already been viewed over 2 million times, the news anchor said. Many are calling it a powerful moment of standing up to privilege. Marcus's chest tightened. He grabbed the remote and turned off the TV. Emma looked up at him. "Daddy, that was you." "Yeah, baby, it was." "Why were you on TV?" Marcus didn't have an answer. By noon, the video had spread to every platform: Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok. Each one had its own angle, its own caption. Waiter defends deaf son against arrogant billionaire. Single black dad loses job standing up for what's right. This is what courage looks like. The view count climbed as Marcus watched from his laptop, hidden in the apartment with the blinds drawn. 3 million, 4 million, 5 million. The comment section scrolled endlessly. Some people called him a hero. Others said he'd overstepped. A few accused him of staging it. But the overwhelming majority was united in their anger toward Victoria Hartwell. By the 3rd day, the video had reached 10 million views. News vans parked outside his building. Reporters knocked on his door. Marcus didn't answer. He kept Emma away from the windows. Then his landlord called. "I saw the video," Mr. Kumar said, his voice gruff but not unkind. "Hell of a thing you did. I'm still going to need the rent, but I'll give you an extra 2 weeks. That's the best I can do." Marcus exhaled slowly. "Thank you." 2 weeks. It was something. But the real miracle came 4 days after the video went viral. An email landed in Marcus's inbox. The subject line read, "For the father who stood up for us." Inside was a link to a crowdfunding page. Marcus's hands trembled as he clicked through. Someone had started a fund in his name. For Emma's medical bills, for rent, for the life he was struggling to hold together. The page had been up for less than 48 hours. It had already raised $37,000. Marcus scrolled through the donations. $5, $20, $50, $100. Each one came with a message. "Thank you for showing my son that his voice matters. My daughter is deaf. This made me cry. You stood up when no one else would. Let us stand up for you. I was a single parent once. I know how hard it is. You're not alone." Marcus read every comment. All of them. He sat at the kitchen table with tears streaming down his face, unable to process the kindness of strangers who owed him nothing. Emma walked in and saw him crying. She climbed into his lap and wrapped her small arms around his neck. "It's okay, Daddy," she whispered. "Don't be sad." Marcus held her tight. "I'm not sad, sweetheart. I'm just really, really grateful." By the end of the week, the fund had passed $200,000. Enough to pay off Emma's medical bills, enough to cover rent for 2 years, enough to breathe. The next morning, Marcus called the hospital. "St. Mary's, how can I help you?" "I'd like to schedule a surgery for my daughter, Emma Jackson. Dr. Rivera recommended a valve repair surgery. I can pay for it now." There was a brief silence on the other end. Then the scheduler's voice softened. "We can get you in next month. Would that work?" Marcus's voice cracked. "Next month is perfect." A week and a half after the video went viral, Marcus received a text from an unknown number. "Can we meet? You reminded me that my voice matters." Ethan. They met at a coffee shop called Broad Awakening, tucked between a bookstore and a laundromat. Marcus arrived early and sat by the window watching the street, his palms sweating. Ethan walked in 10 minutes later. He looked different, lighter. His shoulders were straighter, his expression softer. He sat down across from Marcus, and for a moment, neither of them spoke. "I've been wanting to thank you," Ethan said quietly. "You don't need to thank me," Marcus said. Ethan smiled faintly. "Yes, I do." He pulled out a leather notebook, well-worn, and flipped it open. Inside were pages of neat, careful handwriting. "I started writing after that night," Ethan said. "Things I've wanted to say for years, but never could." They talked for over an hour. Ethan told him about growing up in a world that expected him to adapt but never met him halfway, about the isolation, the loneliness, the feeling that he was always a burden. "I learned sign language when I was 5, Ethan said, "but my mom refused to learn it. She said it would make me dependent." Marcus felt anger flare in his chest. "That's not fair." "I know," Ethan said, "but I didn't realize it until you said something, until someone finally told her she was wrong." Marcus told him about Emma, the hospital bills, the eviction notice, the fear that he wasn't enough. "I keep thinking I'm failing her," Marcus admitted. Ethan leaned forward, his expression serious. "You're wrong. You're more than enough." When they stood to leave, Ethan stopped and turned to Marcus. "Can I meet her?" Ethan asked. "Your daughter, Emma?" Marcus's heart swelled. "I'd like that." They met the following Saturday at the park near Marcus's apartment. The weather was clear, the sky a brilliant blue. Emma was nervous at first, clutching Marcus's hand as Ethan approached. But when Ethan knelt down and signed hello to her, she lit up. "You know sign language?" she asked, her voice full of wonder. Ethan grinned and signed back. For the next hour, he taught Emma basic signs, her name, his name, thank you, friend. She was a fast learner, her small hands moving with determination. When she finally got friend right, she squealed with delight and threw her arms around Ethan. Ethan looked up at Marcus, his expression soft. "She's amazing," Ethan said. "Yeah, Marcus said, his throat tight. She is. As the sun began to set, they walked back toward the apartment. Emma ran ahead, her laughter echoing through the park. "You taught me something that night," Ethan said after a while. "What's that?" Marcus asked. Ethan met his eyes. "That silence isn't peace. It's fear." Marcus thought about that. About all the years he'd stayed quiet. About all the times he'd swallowed his anger because he thought it was the only way to survive. "And you taught me something too," Marcus said. "What?" "That courage can be heard even without sound." Marcus stood in the apartment months later, watching Emma sleep in her hospital bed, her small chest rising and falling steadily after successful surgery. Ethan sat in the chair beside her, a new notebook open on his lap, drawing pictures for her to sign about. The three of them had become a kind of family, not by blood, but by choice, by the decision to speak up, by the courage to stand. Marcus set his hand on Ethan's shoulder. The young man looked up and smiled. No words were necessary. Sometimes silence is how we listen. Sometimes listening is how we heal. Claude can make mistakes. Please double-check responses.